I get the pleasure of introducing my good friend John Mayo this morning. If you ever been to AU, you have noticed that if you see me, you see John. If you see John, you see me. We're always hanging out. John is an engineering technology manager for New Leaf Energy. He's also an expert elite charter member, and what that means is he was the one of the first to be inducted into the program. And he's been working with Autodesk products for about 25 years on site, utility, drainage, transportation, and flood analysis projects. And without further ado, Johnny, take it away.
Thank you very much. All right, can everyone, let me get a screen share going here. All right, there we go. Screens, let's go to screen two. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Featureline Tips, Tricks, and Hacks. My name is John Mayo. I'm going to skip my introduction because we have so much to talk about and so little time to do it in. Read all about me here in this handout. You do have access to the handout. I am going to copy these links and paste them into our chat in Teams. And feel free to open up the presentation and follow along because I am going to try to keep Civil 3D open on my screen for most of the time. I've also saved a data set that can be downloaded, and you can simultaneously open up these files and view along and explore all the stuff we have. All right, so today we're going to talk about Featureline tips, tricks, and hacks. And this was a really difficult presentation to put together because these tools haven't been, there's nothing really new in them in the last 4 or 5 years. A few little things, but everything is out there on Google, on YouTube, and you've seen it all. So what I'm going to do today is take you through some tips. I'm going to talk through them very fast, give a little demonstration. I'm going to go into some tips, give some demonstrations and some hacks. And let's see, maybe I can give you something that you haven't seen everywhere, and at least maybe reaffirm a lot of your best practices. All right, so the first thing we're going to do, and I am going to ask you all again to open up the document and follow along. But with the first tips I have, I'm going to talk to you about, feature line grading. What we're doing here is we're setting ourselves up to do grading, and you should set up your drawing environment. Unload unnecessary XREFs. Freeze unrequired layers. This is better for performance than turning them off because you're going to remove them from system memory. You can Google AutoCAD turning off layers versus freezing to find out more about that. Minimize your object snaps and your drawing aids. Give AutoCAD fewer decisions to make when you're grading. When I do grading, I generally only have an endpoint snap set, and then I'll shift right click if I want to override to another snap. Set up viewports to use, to see, visualize, and not just that, but work in your model. I like keeping a 3D viewport open here because I can work in here. I can't really work in the event viewer. Another tip, if you have side-by-side monitors, minimize Civil 3D, stretch it out across both monitors, and slide your viewport to the edge of the two monitors, and you can get your plan view on one screen, your 3D view on another screen, and shift between plan preview or plan profile, plan, and 3D as you need. I also save views in my drawing. And if you look at your second button in the viewport controls, I generally save one or three views for everything. In here, I would go -V, enter, save, enter, 2. And if I use that -V command again, R1, uh, keep repeating it, R3, it's a lot easier to cycle through your drawing with those views set like that. And again, you can always, once you save a view, you can access it right in your viewport controls. And even in the view cube, I think they are in here. Some of them, yes, UCS. Your UCSs are saved there. All right, so I do all of that to set up my drawing before I start grading, to give AutoCAD a better shot of performing good and keeping me running so I'm focused on my task. All right, we're going to quickly move along here, and I am going to go into our tips. I'm going to start with number 1. If you've downloaded this presentation, you can follow along with the numbers that I call out as I'm going. All right, my first tip, don't start grading with feature lines. You learn to use the grading optimizer to create your feature lines for a design model. This will save you a lot of time once you learn it, and it's going to really help you get to a balanced site a lot faster. And this is what's critical for me, is finding that balanced site earthwork faster, because I don't want to go through all the revisions, raise the building, lower the building, raise the basin, lower the basin. I don't recommend building models, number 2, entirely from feature lines except on small projects. Performance will suffer on larger designs. I probably would not use feature lines alone to do a mega mall site development. But I do it for a single family home, a small commercial site. And if you look at our examples that I gave you, in this one here, I have a demo one. This is the main file. We've got a little single family home. We've got a little commercial site. It may be a doctor's office or a bank, but they're here for exploration. I would probably not be wanting to build out all of these lots in one file with feature lines alone. Use reference plane, number 3. Use reference plane surfaces and relative elevations to define feature lines for curbs, walls, swales, buildings. Remember, you want to use feature lines to create the objects you're constructing in the field. Don't use them to create contours. Contour grading is one of my big irks, and I really try to avoid teaching those methods, because revisions are going to take you a lot longer, especially if someone did a long swale with all contours and someone says, we got to shift it over, we got to redo it. It's a lot of extra work, even though it seems in the beginning that building with these contours is easy because it's just polylines. It's the revisions that will kill you. When you build your reference planes, and I'm going to show this right here. Here's our commercial site. I built this with a reference plane. When you build your reference planes, I recommend you use feature lines and not use gradings. Here is my site plane, and I'll put on my topo for the site plane. Here is the reference surface for that development. We start with the building, and I came out at 2%, away from the building, up down here, 3% down here. What I like about the feature lines is that when I start my editing, I've got my graphical tools. I like the graphical tools a lot. And I would just use, if I needed to revise this model, I would quickly use my quick elevation edit on these segments. And if I unisolate the layers and turn off that reference surface, you're going to see how all of these labels and the curb elevations and the building elevations are all going to change once I start editing. All right, let's take this down at -1. Take this down at -1. Also note that if you're using the quick elevation editor and you don't see the green glyph, go down, check your site, make sure you're on the right site, select an object, and that will show. All right, so we've got that coming down at -1. Oop, I want this one coming down at -1. I've got this coming here. We want that going up at 1, and the other one will then go down at 1. Come down here, -2, -2, and again hit that cross grade for the high point here at 1, and the other one follows along. And I just completely updated that entire grading model using that reference surface, including these labels that we'll talk about later, that have the top and bottom of curb elevation in one label. Again, these feature lines are all relative to that reference surface. The top of curb is right at grade with a 0 offset from that surface, and the bottom of curb I just lowered. It's -0.5 feet from that planar surface. So this is a nice way to keep these models up going. I could now take my basin lowered if I needed to and fix up the contours as I need. Again, I reiterate number 5, use feature lines to define the objects you're building, not contours. Let Civil 3D do the contour interpolation. It is much faster at this than UI or anyone else. After I finish my model, I will usually come in and clean up my contours. And with that, I can do that very quickly. Again, here's the same model. And, if I have a picky project engineer, they're going to say, oh, those contours aren't very pretty. So I'm just going to take a couple of polylines after the model is done. I don't want to do this a lot. I'm hoping my team will, allow some jagged contours during review until we get the storm, the sanitary, the environmental constraints, the zoning constraints all worked out. And then at the end, I'm going to take these polylines and I'm literally just going to start a polyline by tracing to the end point of a contour because I want to pick up the elevation and just draw it to where I want it to end. And I'm going to put them all on one layer so I can select similar. I can go up to my surface. I can look at my commercial lot. I'm going to add these as break lines to the surface definition, not as contours, because I don't want to add any of that other, minimize points, swap edges. And note I have curves in those polylines, so my mid-ordinate distance is very important, and 0.1 should handle that well. But once I add those polylines to that surface, those contours all clean up, I'm done, I'm ready to go, and I move on to my next task. Another big tip when you're working with feature lines, and that is to keep your elevation points and your PIs to a minimum. All right, so here in this residential lot, if I select these all, look at my, all these feature lines have minimal elevation points or PIs, only really at the horizontal geometry. The only place I have dense data is on the limit of grading. And I need that on the limit of grading because I want it to tie into that existing surface perfectly. And I want all those contours to really line up. And to do that, of course, you're going to need, when you create them, to insert intermediate grade breaks. But this is where you have to be very judicial with this setting, because if you use this on a lot and you start putting, elevation points at an increment of 5 feet, 1 foot, your drawing is going to slow down incredibly. And if I were doing this entire subdivision with feature lines, it would be a very slow drawing and very difficult to work with. All right. And the last one, number 8, not the last one, but last one on this slide, number 8, is really only valid for older versions. This was fixed in 25 and 26, where trimming a feature line or a 2D polyline or a 3D polyline that had a lot of elevation points or PIs would normally freeze up your computer for, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 minutes, and eventually come back. But those trim commands would literally be reading every vertice or elevation point on that polyline, looking for crossing objects, and that gets a little crazy. The way around that, if you're still using 23 or 22, is use break features instead. You have break feature up in your ribbon, and you can always use a first point, down in the command line, the first point, and you can give it a first point, and a second point could be the same, and you can put a break on there, or break it from 2 points. And that didn't work right very well because it's a closed polyline. But the break command will help you if you're still on those older versions. The good news is the AutoCAD GPU, CPU, and memory enhancements in 2025 and 26 don't seem to lock up with the trim commands, which is very nice. All right, I'm going to move to the next slide. We are on tip number 9. Use line labels and surface labels to confirm your design. And I do this a lot. I set up my labels. I have line labels linked to these buildings to get me my floor elevations. I have surface spot elevations to get critical points that I need, labels on my swale. The big thing to know about this is that your surface labels will always stay in the same spot. Problem with them is they're not going to align to a linear object like a line label will. Well, there's a problem with that too, because with line labels, and let's take a look at that, we have that same edge of pavement here. These labels are not pinned. These labels are pinned. And the problem with line labels, especially with spot elevations and grades, is that if I do any editing, even as a small edit, like inserting an elevation point, all those labels are going to shift on me. And I'm going to have to go back and readjust them. And I try to avoid this. I don't want to use line labels for a lot of these spot elevations. I prefer to use surface labels where I could, but the grade labels you're going to want to keep and you're going to have to mess with them. Now, you can drag and then pin your labels. They have to be dragged first. And there's a right click. You can toggle a label pin. You can toggle it in your properties dialog. And if you now edit this, the line labels are going to somewhat stay where they were, but still move a little bit. But look down here, you'll see these two labels. I'm going to put an elevation point here. If I hit enter, the text holds the point, but the leaders don't, and I have to drag. So pinning your labels may help you save some time with those, but be careful with your line labels. Use them judiciously, like I said, really where you only need the lines where you need the labels to align to those lines. You can see wherever I drag this, it's staying aligned to that feature line there. All right, let's move on to number 10. This is really important if you're going to use feature lines to build corridors or Project Explorer. In the old days, even now again, if I'm doing a small project like this, I just might take all of these feature lines, add them to the surface in one shot without names, without descriptions, build that surface, and then go through and model it. But if I'm using corridors, if I'm using the Project Explorer, those feature line names are going to help you manage your data, help you organize, help you build baselines, help you edit. And it's really easy to use them. Just go into your template, go down to your grading in the settings tab of Toolspace, go to your grading section, expand on the commands, right click on create feature lines, edit the command settings. And in your feature line creation, just turn feature line naming on. It's going to automatically name all of your feature lines and help you identify them better. All right, so auto naming critical, turn it on in your templates. That's number 11. Use those names. We'll get into seeing how they help you. The names help you manage your data in a bit. Let's go on to number 12. And this is just a very quick tip. Generally speaking, if you're working with gratings, if you have a basin like this, it's better to build from down, up and out, rather than from the top, down and in. And that's because if you have tight curves on your basin, As you offset inside, you may lose those curves, or they may become too small to solve, and your offsets may not solve if your depth does not work with the distance you have. Just a quick tip, and I'm going to actually defy that quick tip later in a minute with some new technology, but keep that in mind when you're building gratings. Let's go to number 13. Use your style priority in feature lines to help you control your grades with split points. Now, this is a big lesson. I really don't have time to, but you should really Google this, watch a video, and practice a bit if you don't use style priority. And style priority is seen in your sites. This is my main site here. If you right click on feature lines and go to properties, in your options, you have a list of all your feature line styles. And the feature lines listed at the top of this list are going to have a higher priority than the ones at the bottom. So I set my styles, my limited disturbance, I always want held. I don't want that changing from the existing ground elevations. Next, I have a special style I use called hold grade, and it gets its color by layer. And then from there, we go to buildings and patios and pavements. And what you can see with these priorities is all my split points, and I should have all these split points on this building line here, right? I've got split points where this stoop connects here, two of them. I've got a split point where this patio connects here, and I should have, I'm going to delete this PI, another split point where this driveway meets. And with that in my style priorities, now remember, buildings take precedence over stoops and over pavements. So if I right click and raise that building, and I'm going to select all three feature lines here. I define my building with three feature lines. I'll talk about that in a minute. I can just right click on them, raise lower. I can bring this up a foot. And as you can see, my stoop followed the building. The patio followed the building and the driveway followed the building. And I would then have to now readjust this. And I'm going to start again. I use a lot of graphical commands. I use my quick elevation edit, and I use this generally when I'm doing single segments. I use my set grade between points a lot when I need to span grades or elevations across multiple segments. And I do use my adjacent elevations by reference really quite often, along with elevations from surface. But in this case, I would be starting off here, and let's fix this, right? We want to take that stoop down at -2%. We're going to go through some quick surface edits here. Take that down at -2, and now look, the stoop, the split points, they brought the sidewalk up because they're at a lower priority. So now I'm going to take my inner edge of the sidewalk. I have to span multiple segments, so I'm going to go to my set grade between points. I'm going to start there with the elevation. I'm going to come down here at -2%. Oh, -2. And then I'm going to want a straight grade from that point to the driveway, but I've got to readjust the driveway first, right? So I'm going to take this down. 6.7%, way too much on a parking area. Let's take that down at -3.5. And this magenta, these magenta styles here, these are the ones that hold grade. So now what I'm going to do is, and watch this over here, right? The magenta style has priority over the red pavement style. So I'm going to start here and go across 0. And the split point on that driveway raises up in 3D view. And now I know I've got a constant grade going across there, and you can see my contours level out with that driveway. I would then now go back to my set feature grade, and I'm going to get onto the correct feature line. I would probably want to take this down here at -1% at a minimum on that, and that would straighten out. And now with the driveway, I can take that point that I held, or the sidewalk, I'm sorry, flatten that out, and look at that. We got a cross grade of 27%. So again, here's my priority. I'm using these feature lines to control the cross grade across that sidewalk, and I might do that with some smaller objects that wouldn't, make sense to build a corridor for this small little sidewalk. So I'm going to take that down at -1. We'll get a little bit of -1. Not 27. We want to go that way at -1. And there we go. My model is basically all revised. I may want to regrade now my swales out because I lifted up that building. I may want to see it. If bringing these down and straight grading them has any change. But there we go. That's how I would go about using those style priorities to help with those surface revisions. And that's a pretty quick way to adjust that model, even with just feature lines without a reference surface. Just go through that with those graphical commands and using those priorities. All right, so editing a model. This is number 14 on our tips continued. You saw me use a lot of the graphical methods, but there are also tabular methods. They're very important to learn. I recommend you learn both graphical and tabular methods. The elevation editor is really the primary one we use, but I don't go here a lot because I don't have control over the split points, right? And I gotta watch them. But there's a lot we can do up here. We can add elevation points, remove elevation points. We can get elevations from a surface. We can reverse, and we can set grade between the points or flatten to a specific elevation. On top of the elevation editor, if you want to use tabular methods to modify multiple polylines or multiple feature lines, I recommend you go to Project Explorer. In the Project Explorer, if we start that up and bring that over, there's really some nifty tools in here. Here's your feature lines up here. You have all your categories of Civil 3D objects. Here's our feature lines. This drawing has 107 feature lines in it for those things. And here's, you can see where I didn't use names. All right, and it's tough to identify these. I could right click and select it in AutoCAD viewport, and you can see it's not even in there. But down here, I used names, and you can see that the names are going to help me because those are all the labels. Here's some of my residential, right? I can right click. If I double click, I'll see it highlight. I can rename it. I can right click, select it, and I can see it. And I can come down here and start editing elevations as I need. If you right click, you can set grade between the feature lines, holding the start, holding the end, or holding the start and end. You can zoom to it, pan to it. Another great tool to help you with your feature line editing, especially if you want to or prefer tabular editing and want to go through all of your stuff, right? I can select this guy up here and start focusing and, raise or lower that feature line as well. You can raise lower here, set constant grades, set elevations by either right clicking on the feature line in the upper list or using the actual vertices down below. All right, so that concludes our tips, and that was fast, furious. And let's move in quickly to tricks because I had an hour and 5 minutes of material and I've got to move fast. I invite you to download this recording later, slow it down, open up the files and open up the presentation and review what we're doing here. Because again, I am speaking in my New Jersey fast voice for you. I apologize, but we're going to get through this. All right. So feature line tricks. Number one, IDing elevation errors. I told you I like having this 3D view because I can work in it. And one of those things I do is a lot of times I have surface errors, feature line errors. I can always see them spiking down to 0. And I may want to identify a bunch of them in plan without having to zoom in and deal with a whole bunch of contour endpoints that I might snap to wrong incorrectly. So what I'll do is I'll go into that 3D view, and this is an old surveyor's trick. I'm just going to draw a circle. Again, only my endpoint snap set, right? Limit the decisions. I come down here, circle, radius 3, hit enter, enter again to repeat the command, enter, enter. I'm just hitting enter here, drawing all these circles on all these spots. I'm going to select one, right click, select similar, and boom, in plan view now, I can see exactly where all those elevations are failing. I use this method a lot to help me locate some of those errors. And again, prevent having to snap over any of these contours and find that exact elevation where it's going wrong. So that is trick number one. Trick number two is going to be modeling your buildings. So a lot of surveyors, especially surveyors and some engineers, just put masks or boundaries over surfaces and hide the contours. And I really don't like that, because if I do earthworks, I'm going to get zero results under that building. And if that building has a basement, that's quite a bit of earthwork I'm missing. So I use basically three lines to define my, two or three lines to define my buildings. And in here you can see I've got the outer edge, which I call the grade line. This is where the dirt hits the foundation. And after that, we know that the concrete where the dirt hits may rise up above the dirt or the pavement. So I want to model in the basement. I offset this 0.05 units, and I set this inner middle poly or feature line to the basement elevation or the bottom of slab if I want to account for slab volumes. I then offset it again 0.05 units, and I use this to model the first floor. And I can link those labels to that entire building so that when I do come in and I want to raise lower it, raise lower, I'm going to raise this up 5 feet. All those, I get instant feedback right away from it. I'm going to undo that because I really don't want to raise that building up 5 feet. But that's quick feedback. Also, if you look, and this is probably out of uh, the scope of this, but you can also build surfaces for your buildings to help you visualize them and help you model them and display them in profiles and cross sections. And if I go back to demo one, you can see I have a surface here, one surface for these three buildings, and it just helps me visualize what's going on with that. Again, not for this class, but there's that surface built from the basements and the top floors only. It does not include the grade lines because that would give us some funky looking buildings. All right, so let's go on to number three. Let's use feature lines to project cross grades. And I already showed you this, but when I did that avoid split points, you saw exactly how I used that one style just to project cross grades across my driveway and my sidewalk. Very quick, simple edits. I showed you that trick. I'm not going to repeat it. I got to save some time. We're going to move on to number four. So we talked about, again, all those split points. It's really great to use your style priorities to control them. But what if you don't? What if you just want to avoid split points completely and be able to edit an elevation no matter which feature line you select? Well, that's easily done. All you have to do is insert a PI at every crossing, everywhere there's a crossing. Now, if you don't want to do it all individually, there's a great tool right up here, feature line crossings. And if I select that and select, you get an option to insert elevation points or PIs. You notice that that command put an elevation point right now at all of my split points. And now I can control the grade of that split point from either modifying the stoop or the building. So if you don't like the split points, there is an easy way out. Just make sure that every crossing has a PI or an elevation point. And with that, you'll be able to avoid working with split points. All right, so a lot of times we're asked to export our feature lines to polylines. And a lot of times when we do that, we wind up with feature lines that are all segmented if they have varying elevations, right? If they have varying elevations, and I don't have one in here we go. Explode, right? You can see how when you export them would normally or just explode them, your curves don't retain. Now, there's a lot of old tricks, and I have shown the old trick of using a zero surface to flatten these, but there's a better way if you want to export all your feature lines to 2D polylines retaining curves, and that is use your Project Explorer. Go into your Project Explorer, find your feature lines, select one or all of the ones you want, and just right click. Look at this. Quick export to AutoCAD 2D file. It's right there. If you take that, that command will give you absolutely beautiful 2D polylines retaining all those curves, and you don't have to worry about getting segmented stuff. So quick, so easy. No stupid little tricks required. Just push that button, select them, and you're good to go. All right, let's see, where are we? We are now on number 7, and that is create dynamic feature lines from the new pond objects. And this is pretty exciting. Some new technology. It's not fully ready for release yet, but it is available if you're using 2026. You can go to your account on autodesk.com and you can download the tech preview for the Civil 3D drainage analysis. And you can find that it's a little bit hidden, but once you go to your products and services, if you go down to Civil 3D, make sure you're on the 26 version, click View Details. This is where it gets a little lost in the sauce. Go to Extensions, and here you have the tech preview. Once you install the tech preview for 2026, you're going to get new Civil 3D objects for ponds, underground storage, and channels. And these are really nice. There's going to be some great development with them to help us do our drainage analysis right in Civil 3D without having to go to another third-party application or Excel. But it's really pretty nifty because I can make dynamic feature lines from this pond. Now I'm going to go and create a pond, and I'm going to do it manually. I'm going to give it a depth of 5, an inside slope of 2, freeboard. I'm going to give it a starting elevation of 110. Hit OK, and I can just draw out any shape I want, close it, and there's your pond object right there. You can also convert an object to a pond by creating from objects. And again, set your constraints on it. You can set layers, and I should have done this before, but this is going to go to drainage pond, erase the existing entity, hit OK, and there's your pond. Now, the nice thing is when you draw it manually, you get some nice grip edits. Unfortunately, yet in the tech preview, I'm sure this will change, but I don't know for certain. You don't have any geometry grip edits for if you convert objects. But if you select this, you can easily come up here. You can add curves, specify a radius of 50. You can grip edit these ponds and move them. You can even go in and edit your radii if you want. And the nice thing is that if we come back up here, we can get feature lines from that pond. We can choose a style. I don't have a style here. We can find a layer for them. I have a layer. We can extract all, only the top, the bottom, create dynamic link. That's the big one. Because now with that dynamic link, I have these feature lines pre-drawn. I can come up, I can throw a grading or a corridor on there to daylight that to the surface. You will have to move these to a site. They presently come in siteless, but I'm sure that will change too. And once you do that, you can just create a grading or a corridor onto that outer edge as you need. And you'll have a good, solid, dynamic pond that you can just take all these feature lines, add them to a surface, and you're good to go. And you're not going to lose infills. You're going to have a relative, and I can just go in and edit that pond, and I can change the top or the bottom. I can go into storage. I can tell it, don't start at 110, go down to 105. And that pond will update. Once we click the apply button, you can see it in the 3D view moving up and down and the daylight changing. Again, very nice. You can get your volumes. You can edit it, have these dynamic feature lines and dynamic surfaces, and not have to worry about, I think this is our next tip, disappearing infills. Let's look at that, right? If we have gratings, this is a long-standing issue we've all worked with, but if I just pick up that basin, and here's that grading right here with an infill in the middle, if I pick that up and just move it anywhere, now it's not going to do it, right? The infills may disappear like that. Even if I undo that and just rotate it sometimes, I may even lose that infill. And it becomes cumbersome constantly going back and losing that. Another quick way to avoid those infills is really quite simple. Once you have your basin, don't build a surface from the grading. Just take your feature lines, right click, add them to a new surface, and you don't have to worry about disappearing infills. Hit OK. Again, I have curves. I got to watch my mid-ordinate distance. 0.1 is good. Hit OK. And then I may also want to take that outer line and add it to that surface as an outer boundary to make sure I'm not going to get any triangulation. And again, I use curves. I want to match my mid-ordinate distance to what I used on the feature lines. And there you go. And you can avoid disappearing infills no matter where you pick up. And let's set this basin to rebuild automatic. You can pick up and move that basin now anywhere you want. And your surface is just going to stay right where it is without worrying about those disappearing infills. All right, so let's go to hack number 2. I'm moving along pretty good. And let's look at following curves. So much to my dismay, you may still find people modeling grading scenarios using polylines like you have here with these orange contours, right? I hate this. Please use a feature line in a grading or a feature line in a corridor to build these swales. You'll be much happier and save a lot of time once you have to start going through revisions. But let's say I had this model and I really just wanted these surface contours to follow those curves a little better. They don't follow very well now, do they? Right? They're coming straight out here. Well, it's really very simple. All I'm going to do is add a new feature line on the same site. I'm going to start on the end point of that curve, and I'm going to start there because it's going to pick up the contour elevation. I'm going to snap to the center of that curve, and I'm going to transition the grade down to the next contour. And I'm going to end with the elevation. It knows it's 115. And I'm going to do that again. I'm going to draw one more up here so you can see it working more than once. Start on the end point of the curve, get the contour elevation, snap to the center of the arc, transition the grade to the next contour, and get the elevation from that contour. And now watch what happens to these contours once we just add these two break lines to the surface. I don't have curves on this. I don't need the mid-ordinate. Did I add them to the right surface? Probably not. I added them to the EG. Let's right click, add them again to the swale surface. Hit OK, and look at those contours following those curves. Same thing down here, right? Same thing. These are pre-drawn, add to surfaces, break line, swale, OK, OK, and there's my swale. All right, use feature lines to place, use sites. Hack number 3, use sites to place feature lines on their own layer. In this drawing, I have 2 sites. I have a site for the existing topo, which is just made up, and a site for this proposed topo. And if you notice, I can take any of these, I can use all of my layer commands, isolate, unisolate, freeze, off, even multiples, and I don't have to worry about anything. How do we do that, right? This feature line is automatically placed onto its own layer named after the site. Easy to do. Number one, go find your feature line styles, general multi-purpose feature line styles, and set them all to go to layer 0. Plan, model, profile, everything, layer 0. Then you go to your drawing settings and go to your object layers and set your feature lines to go to layer 0 and use a prefix or a suffix, whichever you need, and you type in the suffix you want. The asterisk in this value will bring in the site name to that layer. And that's really neat because I can just come in here and go feature line and look at my layers. I've only got 2 feature line layers, EG and contour curve. But if I create a new feature line and create a new site and test site, hit OK, and I'm just going to create a feature line from here to here. And the layer is off because layer 0 is off. But look, it made a new layer, feature line, site. And I give it a color, turn my layers on, and there's that feature line on its own layer. I can isolate the layer. I can select 2 of them, isolate the layers, unisolate the layers, turn them on, freeze them, do what I want, and not have to worry about it messing with the other feature lines, where if you have a global setting, you might not be able to do that because it's relying on 2 layers to actually control the display of that feature line, like most Civil 3D objects. All right, very useful trick, oops command. We can see right here, these break lines are not modeling correctly, and those contours should not be shooting out like that. And we should know, based on being experienced modelers, that they were probably entered into the surface definition as break lines with a mid-ordinate distance that was too large. Now, what if I wanted to remove them from the surface definition, and I didn't want to go into my prospector and start digging into, all the definitions and all the break lines I had here? All right, I didn't use names. I was, very lazy. There is a trick. What we can do is erase the break lines, type oops, not undo. Undo will bring the feature lines back into your drawing and also put them back into the surface. But the oops command is going to simply unerase the last objects you erased. So if I type oops, I get them back into my drawing without placing them back into the surface definition. And that is pretty good because now I can just select them, re-add them to the surface again with the curves and the very small horizontal offset. I need to use a smaller, and I'm going to use 0.01 here, a smaller mid-ordinate distance to get those triangles to form in there much better than they did before. Where are we now? Hack number 5, use the join feature to automatically add break line data to your drawing. How do you do that? Wow. All right, well, let's look at this. We had this driveway, and it's inside the surface definition right now as a break line. Same thing with this up here and this. They're in the surface definition. What if someone said, you know what, we got to realign that driveway? Well, I would trim out the portions I don't want. I would pick these up and move them to the endpoint. These are nothing but 2D polylines, but I want to make sure that that endpoint is matching and holding on to that feature line grade. And now this is still in the surface, these 2 red ones. So if I use that feature line join command, I am going to automatically add those break lines to the surface definition in one shot. And you can use 3D polylines, 2D polylines, whatever you need. They'll come in there. Now I could, go through and again, straight grade that down. I might want to, because these lines are perfectly symmetrical, I can probably get away with using my adjacent elevations by reference and set a 0% cross grade on there. And there we go. Quickly add that information right to your surface by joining it to a break line in that surface. All right, now we are at the last hack of the day, and that is I get this from a lot of companies I have helped, a lot of people I have helped. They want one label to label top and bottom of curbs. And it's really easy to do. And with the relative elevations feature, it's pretty simple to keep them automatically updated. So this label style here is simply pulling up the starting endpoint and the ending endpoint of this feature line. I drew the feature line from the bottom of curb to the top of curb, and then I just added the label. Now, I don't want to do that on everything, so if you select the line first and then select the label, you can literally copy these anywhere on your plan. Let's go to the midpoint over here. And you can pick up elevations. Oop, wrong endpoint. I want that on the bottom of curb. So I'm going to just take it, and I don't even have to move it anymore. I can just drag it now to the mid there and to the mid here. And my label is now there, updated. These lines can be made relative to your surface so that if you have vertical edits, you don't have to worry about doing anything. You can just take that, make it relative to the commercial lot as it is here, relative to surface, 0, picking up those elevations. And I can just take that, copy it around. As soon as my, and I can't do it here, I'd have to raise my reference surface. Let's do that. Let's take our site plane reference surface and let's just quickly edit, raise the datum a foot. So we're at 331, 330 there. Let's go up 1. And now we're at 331 on both of those. And those are all these labels just updated. Now, again, vertical edits, they work great. If you have horizontal edits, like I said, select the feature line, select the label, copy them where you need them, or grip edit them back to your correct elevations where they go. But you can use this for curbs, for walls, for buildings, for berms, anything you want, just with a simple relative feature line. All right, well, I think I got through it. How's my time? Did I make it within an hour? Any feedback?
Yeah, you're doing
You
good.
are close. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. I'm done. Ladies and gentlemen, I don't think I have much time for questions here, but I will be in the lounge for about a half an hour after this before I have to run off to train one of our new vendors. But hey, I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you saw something new in the line if you're an expert. I know we have a lot of talent on here, and I just hope these tips either confirm your beliefs or maybe gave you a new way to look at stuff. With that, I am done. I would like to thank all the members of Augie for allowing me to speak here. It's a great honor and a privilege, and I hope you all enjoyed this. Thank you.